Han Li, with his early Nascent Soul cultivation, slew a demonic cultivator at the peak of the mid-Nascent Soul stage. He became a legend in a single battle. When the two women, Ling Mei Ning and Zilin, learned of this, and how terrifyingly powerful Han Li had become, Ling Mei Ning's face was full of regret for missing her chance back then, while Zilin expressed that, if she had known that day that Han Li possessed such vast divine powers, she might have even offered herself to him. The moment the words left her mouth, Han Li had returned from the land of extreme sunset at some unknown time. Brother Han. The woman surnamed Song and Zilin were startled at first, but they immediately realized who it was and called out Han Li's name. A look of pleasant surprise appeared on both of their faces. Zilin raised a hand and cast a spell on the door. The wooden door immediately flashed with a white light. The door slowly opened towards Han Li. A young man in his 20s was wearing a light, short-sleeved robe. He stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at the three beauties inside the room. A faint smile played on the corners of his mouth. This man was none other than Han Li, who had returned from the land of Jixi after more than 2 years. On his back was an additional yellow bamboo tube of a certain length. It was unknown what it contained. It was carried securely behind him. He didn't seem to intend to put it in his storage bag. If you looked closely, you could see Han Li himself was also slightly different than before. His entire spiritual temperament had undergone a significant change. He appeared much more composed and steady, giving off an unfathomable feeling. Seeing this, the messenger woman didn't have time to think. She hurriedly took a few steps forward and bowed. She said respectfully and shyly, "You finally arrived. I thought you were held up by something, fellow Taoist, and wouldn't be able to make it in time." A faint blush appeared on Zilin's beautiful face. She was a little apprehensive. She also stood up to greet him. This woman didn't know how long Han Li had been there. Could it be that her earlier words had all been overheard by him? When she recalled her words about being willing to offer herself to him, even though Zilin was usually poised and clever, her face now showed shyness and a hint of embarrassment. "Since one promised you, I would naturally arrive on time." Han Li smiled faintly. He gave the woman a meaningful glance. Then he walked into the room unhurriedly. The beautiful woman also bit her red lip lightly. She came over and bowed to Han Li. Han Li waved his hand, telling her to dispense with the formalities. Then he walked to an empty wooden chair. He gestured for everyone to sit down. Ziling's expression quickly returned to normal. She immediately sat down, composed and at ease. As for the woman surnamed Song, she seemed uncertain. She sat down shyly on a similar chair. "When did you return? Was your trip to the heavenly south and the far west a smooth one?" Ziling didn't immediately bring up the matter of Fallen Devil Valley. Instead, she asked about Han Li with a light laugh, and with a peculiar gaze, she sized him up once more. "I encountered some minor trouble in the far west. Although I resolved it successfully, it did cause a bit of a delay. Otherwise, I would have been back half a year ago," Han Li said with a slight smile. Hearing Han Li say this, Ziling and the woman surnamed Song couldn't help but exchange a glance. They grew a little curious. For the current Han Li to call something minor trouble, it must have been no ordinary matter. But seeing that Han Li had no intention of elaborating, the two women were both exceptionally clever, so they naturally didn't press the issue. "I heard you two talking just now. It seems that for the trip to Fallen Devil Valley, only Miss Ziling alone is willing to go, and that Miss Song Shitsi and Miss Ling Mei Ning have both changed their minds. Is this true?" Han Li asked after glancing at the two women. He asked with a calm expression, "Since I already know that I have failed in my duty, I naturally dare not hide anything. After a careful discussion with fellow cultivator Ling Mei Ning, we still feel that this journey is far too dangerous. It would be best to just give up on it. I do not want to, just for the sake of a mere 20 to 30 years of arduous cultivation, take such an unnecessary risk." And fellow cultivator Ling Mei Ning, not long ago, obtained a bottle of spirit pills that are of great help for core formation, and she does not want to take this risk either. After all, the Valley of the Fallen Devil, its reputation as the most dangerous place in the heavenly south is no joke. That spirit pearl fruit is deep within the valley, so the danger is even greater. After hearing the cautious words of the woman surnamed Song, Han Li nodded his head, and did not press for more details. "It's just as well that Song Shishu and Miss Emi not going. The Wanling Mountains are a chaotic mix of people right now, and even if I enter the Valley of the Fallen Devil, I have little confidence that I can emerge completely unscathed." "Miss Ziling, it seems you have not changed your mind. Are you still determined to enter the Valley of the Fallen Devil?" Ziling replied nonchalantly, "As long as Brother Han is willing to enter the valley, I am willing to take the risk. I have complete confidence in fellow Taoist Han." Zilin smiled charmingly and said with composure, "Since fellow Taoist Zilin has put it that way, I will not insist further. However, before I invest in this, there are a few things I must ask clearly." Han Li understood. He looked at Zilin and said without blinking, "That is to be expected, Brother Han. If you have any questions, just go ahead and ask." Zilin agreed without any surprise. "First, regarding the matter of the condensation pearl fruit, I need to reconfirm its authenticity. I don't want to excitedly enter the Fallen Devil Valley, only to find it was all for nothing. Can Miss Zilin be certain about this?" Han Li's expression turned grave. "The condensation pearl fruit is absolutely real. This came from a ghost spirit sect elder's Nascent Soul, who luckily escaped from the Fallen Devil Valley with his life back then. He described it himself. Otherwise, the Nascent Souled monsters of the ghost spirit sect would not have put so much effort into the matter of the Fallen Devil Valley. I have a jade slip here as well. It is a recording of that Nascent Soul's personal description of the location of the condensation pearl fruit. This should be enough to prove whether this matter is true or not." Zilin was already prepared for Han Li's question. The moment he asked, she immediately took out an emerald green jade slip from her storage pouch and handed it to Han Li. Han Li accepted the jade slip. He immersed his spiritual sense into it and read silently for a while. After a long moment, he then withdrew his divine sense. With an impassive expression, he returned the jade slip to her. "According to what is written here, this spirit pearl fruit does indeed exist. However, the location mentioned is incredibly deep inside Devillful Valley, and it is also rather vague. Relying on these words alone, it is not certain whether the spirit pearl fruit can be found." Han Li frowned slightly and said with some hesitation, "Because that elder from the ghost spirit sect had his nascent soul leave his body, and only then did he accidentally stumble upon the location of the spirit pearl fruit. So, his memory of the location is somewhat hazy, which is perfectly normal. However, this also mentions several very distinct features. Finding the spirit pearl fruit shouldn't be a major issue," Zilin explained, as if afraid that Han Li would back out. Han Li pondered the contents of the jade slip. He was clearly weighing the pros and cons. "Even if we find this spirit fruit, we still have to be in the valley to refine and consume the creation pill. Otherwise, the spirit fruit's efficacy will be greatly diminished. Regarding the supplementary materials for pill refining, Miss Zilin, have you prepared them?" A moment later, Han Li looked up and asked calmly. Zilin was overjoyed to hear this. She immediately suppressed her excitement and said with a radiant face, "The supplementary materials for the creation pill aren't easy to find, but over the past few years, I've gathered more than 10 sets. As long as we have the spirit pearl fruit, and our luck isn't extremely bad, refining the creation pill will be absolutely no problem. Since these are not major problems, I will take my chances in this valley. However, Miss Zilin, I don't need to elaborate on the dangers within the valley. After we enter the valley, within the scope of my ability, I will naturally protect you, fellow Taoist. But, if we encounter a danger that even I cannot withstand, you must also be prepared to protect yourself, fellow Taoist." Han Li's expression was calm, and he said nonchalantly, "That's a given. If something like that were to really happen, it would be due to my own poor fortune. I would never dare to harbor any resentment. Besides, when it comes to saving my own life, I have some confidence in myself," Zilin said without a moment's hesitation. Her gentle demeanor vanished completely, replaced by a hint of fierce determination. Han Li was very satisfied with Zilin's words. His expression softened. "How does one gain entry through the Ling sect? Have you 3 fellow Taoists found anything out? When I arrived, I heard something. The Ling sect is actually issuing Zemo tokens to limit the number of entrants. This is rather strange, judging by the current situation. Letting in several hundred cultivators versus over 1,000 cultivators shouldn't make much of a difference. It seems there is some restriction on the entry method itself. Otherwise, a single token wouldn't cost tens of thousands of spirit stones. With such a great opportunity, why wouldn't the Ling sect seize the chance to make a huge profit? Brother Han, you truly are extraordinary. Your guess is pretty much spot on." A glint flashed in Ziling's eyes, and she broke into a charming smile. "Although the news was leaked, my beautiful sister and I didn't go to the trouble of finding out the specific entry method, but we vaguely learned from that disciple that this time, the entry, it seems they need to rely on the power of many disciples from the ghost spirit sect, and it also consumes a large amount of spirit stones. Only then can they enter the valley at a specific time. As for the number of people entering the valley, it is indeed limited for that reason, no matter what method the ghost spirit sect uses to enter the valley. This time, our Falling Cloud sect was allocated 3 slots for the Fallen Demon Ridge. I also obtained one when I was at the Izu sect. Entering the outer valley is not a problem. As for the inner valley, it is fraught with difficulties. No one can be certain that they can pass through it completely unscathed. However, I believe most cultivators will only stay in the outer valley to hunt for treasure. Those who dare go to the inner valley are a different breed of cultivator. Of course, there will certainly be some cultivators who want to try their luck, but there won't be too many. While in the outer valley, fellow Taoist Dylan, the danger is not great. You can handle it on your own at first. When it's time to enter the inner valley, Han Ling's eyes flickered. Suddenly, his lips moved slightly, but there was no sound. He was actually using a voice transmission technique to send a message. The woman and Mei Ning saw this, and showed no dissatisfaction. After all, this journey is extremely perilous. It's natural for them to be a bit cautious. It is no surprise that their words are filled with suspicion and malice. After Ling heard this, he hesitated for a moment, and immediately nodded in agreement. In that case, Han, and fellow Taoist Ling, will meet again in the Fallen Devil Valley. Oh, by the way, Song Shichi, I heard from the disciples in our sect that senior brother Cheng has also arrived here. Do you happen to know where he is? Han Li's gaze shifted, and he asked the female messenger about the silver-haired elder. I'm afraid I do not know about this matter. Senior Uncle Cheng was traveling with a few of his close old friends, and they have never contacted us after arriving. For my part. The woman surnamed Song paused blankly for a moment, then hurriedly replied, Is that so? It seems senior brother Cheng intends to, before his time is up, enter the valley and risk it all. Han Li muttered to himself, as if he was pondering something. I heard that on this trip to the Fallen Devil Valley, there will also be Mulan spell warriors participating. Is this matter true or false? Do you have any news on this? After a moment of silence, Han Li asked again with a slight frown. The three of us also heard this news, but there are many conflicting rumors about this matter. We also have no way of knowing if it's true. Lin also seemed quite troubled by this. A helpless look appeared on her face. Han Li rubbed his chin, saying nothing, but a moment later, Han Li's expression suddenly changed. He abruptly stood up, said a word of farewell, and then gracefully departed, leaving only the three female cultivators in the room, staring at each other for a long moment. What happened? Why did Brother Han leave in such a hurry? Lin's bright eyes darted about, showing her confusion. I don't know. Perhaps Senior Han had other important business. Lin's dark brows knitted together, revealing a hint of disappointment. The woman surnamed Song gazed in the direction of the door, and seemed to fall deep in thought. Old devil, what are you doing? Do you really want your soul to be annihilated? At this time, Han Li was walking down a deserted street. His pace was steady and unhurried. He appeared completely calm and composed, but in reality, he was fuming in his mind, harshly scolding someone. I just saw that girl named Lin. She's just drop dead gorgeous, so I got some ideas. That's a perfectly normal thing. An aged voice replied nonchalantly in Han Li's mind. HMPH. Don't you know that the 7 emotions art you previously used has linked your own joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness to my second Nascent Soul? I don't care if you get lustful, but don't you dare drag me down with you. After all, the second Nascent Soul is connected to my mind as well. Besides, as for Lin, that girl's current appearance isn't even particularly outstanding. How did you see her true face? You used to claim you had countless concubines, and that you've seen every beauty in the world. A single female cultivator is making you act this pathetic. You weren't lying to me before, were you? Han Li was still fuming. He asked coldly, When I first used the 7 emotions art, it was to deal with your main primordial spirit. But who would have thought a mere early-stage Nascent Soul cultivator had actually cultivated a second Nascent Soul and thwarted the attack? Otherwise, how could I have ended up in this state? Although that 7 emotions art cannot control a cultivator's divine sense, but if their joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness are controlled, it can still make an opponent unable to live and unable to die. As for that young girl, although she used a secret art to conceal the needle mark, but how could she possibly hide it from my profound perception? The sovereign's voice was unwavering. He added, still sounding somewhat defiant. Even if your 7 emotions severance art is formidable, it's all for naught if you've targeted the wrong person. Although my second primordial spirit has some connection to me, being struck by the 7 emotions art is merely a minor annoyance to me. You, on the other hand, I never would have imagined that the founding ancestor of the Thousand Bamboo sect, the creator of the Daiyan art, the divine Lord Daiyan from all those years ago, would actually possess a puppet and survive all the way until now. If it weren't for your divine sense, which is truly unbelievably powerful, and your complete mastery of the Dian art. I would never have believed it. But even so, if you mess around with any more female cultivators, and try to disturb my state of mind, don't blame me for being ruthless. Han Li's voice turned chillingly grim. Kid Han, it's not as if you don't know. Even with a bead made from your soul-guiding wood, to help sustain my soul, I will, at most, fade away completely in a few more decades. If it weren't for the last type of puppet I was developing, being mostly complete, I would have wished for an early reincarnation, to be a puppet with absolutely no feelings. I've had enough of living for tens of thousands of years. If you went tens of thousands of years without seeing a woman, you'd be even worse off than me. The old man snorted a few times, looking disdainful. Hearing this, Han Li rubbed his nose, feeling a major headache. Good grief, this old monster whose real body was hidden in the bamboo tube on his back was truly difficult to deal with. Good grief, if he hadn't agreed to impart the final 3 layers of the great development art, and was willing to share several powerful puppet refinement methods that had never been revealed before, and teach them to him as well, he would have used his many methods to eliminate him long ago. What was even more infuriating was that the monster's divine sense was unbelievably powerful, even though he was currently powerless to resist. When he tried to use the soul-searching technique on the old monster, it had no effect whatsoever. Instead, the monster nearly used the opportunity to manipulate his divine sense. This frightened Han Li so much that he never dared to use that technique again. When facing the great development divine lord, this old monster who had lived for tens of thousands of years, for Han Li, felt like an opponent he had no way of dealing with. Old monster, when you possessed the puppet's body, didn't you ever think about moving your primordial spirit out of the puppet again? With your talent, creating such a method shouldn't have been difficult, right? After all, you single-handedly created the great development art. After a moment of silence, he said faintly, do you think the spirit possession technique I used is simple? Back then, I prided myself on my unparalleled talent. There was no one in the world who could match me. So I was distracted by too many things. Not only did I create things like the great development art, a secret art that can strengthen one's divine sense, I also single-handedly founded the Thousand Bamboo Sect, and researched the puppet arts, which had long been lost in the heavenly south. Just these things alone consumed most of my lifespan. Not to mention, I also had to cultivate my techniques, to advance my cultivation to the late Nascent Soul stage, so that I could dominate a region without any rivals. Dominate a region without any rivals. Hearing this, Han Li showed a strange expression. What, you think I'm bragging? When my cultivation was at its peak, because I was always low-key yet arrogant, I only challenged those famous cultivators, and never publicized my own battle records. Therefore, the cultivators who knew my name back then, only those at the very top. Let's not even talk about other places. Back then, the so-called righteous and demonic paths of Tiannan, the 2 old geezers hailed as the #1 cultivators of both paths, were my defeated opponents. I beat them into complete submission. They even willingly gave up the far westland, ceding it to me as the foundation to establish my sect, and they withdrew all of their forces from this land. Otherwise, did you really think a mere desert could make you cultivators of Tiannan, afraid to lay a finger on the far westland? You should know that even if the far westland is barren, it's still the size of 2 nations. That's enough to accommodate quite a few large sects. As the great Divine Lord spoke to this point, his voice was filled with immense pride. You fought to win the far westland. Han Li was speechless upon hearing this. Not only that, I also forced those 2 old geezers to personally swear a poison oath, that for 10,000 years, their disciples and their descendants would not be allowed to enter the far westland. The old man became smug once again. With their status, they would be that obedient. Han Li's mouth twitched. He found it somewhat hard to believe. If they were unwilling, I would have taken their disciples and descendants, and slaughtered every last one of them. Do you really think I'm some kind of wishy-washy person? As for trying to use superior numbers to besiege me, the ones I refined, the over 1,000 puppets are not to be trifled with. However, the cultivators of the righteous and demonic paths still haven't invaded the far west. This does surprise me a little. Could it be that the righteous and demonic cultivators are still adhering to the words of their ancestors, obeying them to this day? The great divine monarch found it a bit strange. Han Li was silent. This old monster was either bragging, or he was truly monstrously powerful back in the day. The 1,000+ puppets he mentioned would be terrifying enough even if they were all at the foundation establishment stage. As for whether the righteous and demonic paths were restricted by an oath back then, not to seize the far west, or if it was because the far west was too remote, and its resources so scarce that they simply couldn't be bothered. Hanli couldn't be bothered to think about it either. It had nothing to do with him. Just as Hanli was feeling shocked, the old man's sigh echoed in his mind. When I had accomplished all of this, when I thought I stood at the pinnacle of the cultivation world, I realized I had made a fatal mistake. My lifespan was running out, but I was still stuck in the late Nascent Soul stage, no matter how astonishing my aptitude and innate talent were. With a mere 200 years left, it was simply impossible for me to get from the late stage to break through to the deity transformation realm. But if I hadn't been distracted by puppetry arts from the start, or creating my own cultivation techniques, I believe that entering the deity transformation stage would not have been a very difficult matter for me. Otherwise, I would have ascended to the spirit realm long ago. Why would I have been trapped in a puppet's body for all those years, only to end up with my soul on the verge of dissipating? The great Divine Lord's voice suddenly grew somber. He seemed somewhat dejected. Hearing this, Hanli couldn't help but roll his eyes internally. There was even a slight hint of jealousy. For ordinary cultivators, even core formation or nascent soul condensation is considered incredibly difficult. Yet for this old monster, entering the deity transformation stage seemed as if it wasn't very difficult. If what he said was true, this person was truly a heaven-defying existence. To call him a once-in-10,000 years cultivation prodigy would be an understatement. After realizing there was no hope of reaching the deity transformation stage, I was still unwilling to accept it, to just have my hands tied and wait for death to arrive. Although as long as the essential soul does not perish, there is still the possibility of reincarnation after death. But for me, even if I could have a next life, without the memories and emotions of this one, would that still be me? It would just be a complete stranger. Besides, in the next life, I might just become a mediocre person who accomplishes nothing, not even knowing if I could possess a spiritual root, or have a chance to become a cultivator again. The chances would be pitifully slim. Terrified by this thought, in my remaining 200 years, I cast everything else aside, and began to painstakingly create a method for eternal life, or a reincarnation technique that could preserve my consciousness. In the end, after countless failures, I finally, based on the great development art, created the spirit latching art. This unprecedented secret technique. As Divine Monarch Dayan spoke, he let out a cold laugh. To give up most of one's cultivation base, just to attach one's divine sense to a puppet, and become one of the living dead for nearly 10,000 years. Hanli suddenly smirked. He snapped mockingly, "What do you know? I was simply running out of time. I had only completed half of the spirit latching art, and was forced to use it. That's how I ended up in this state. After being transferred to the puppet specially made by my stepfather, I never expected that my entire cultivation base would be unexpectedly sealed away. Only my divine abilities related to the spirit stone could still be barely used, but trying to have my primordial spirit leave my body was simply wishful thinking, and that secret chamber was protected by extremely powerful formations that I set up, and guarded by over 100 puppet guards. Without my physical body and magical power, I couldn't even open the seals, or find a way to summon the puppets, and because I was afraid of enemies seeking revenge, I had never told anyone about that secret chamber. As for my only remaining followers, those disciples and subordinates at the Yadan stage, they were also completely unable to find the place. As a result, I was trapped for over 10,000 years. If it weren't for the fact that I was in a puppet body, and had stored a large number of spirit stones in that secret chamber, I would have perished and turned to dust long ago. As he finished speaking, the great Divine Lord's voice turned icy cold. Panli's brow furrowed. He felt a little unsettled inside. But after his expression softened, he still asked, "Old monster, why are you so talkative today? In the past, whenever I tried to ask you about what happened back then, you would always ignore me, with a completely listless look on your face. Why are you willing to explain it in such detail this time?" "Humph, if I don't tell you, who else would I tell? You've actually cultivated the great derivation art. You can be considered half a disciple of mine. Besides, if you hadn't broken into the secret chamber of the Thousand Bamboo sect, and found me when I was on the brink of death, I'm afraid my soul would have been utterly scattered long ago. The spirit offering art is not a true art of longevity, after all. Even if the puppet body could last for 10,000 years without decay, my primordial spirit, without the nourishment of a real physical body for a long time, had also reached the point of being a flickering candle. What I didn't expect was that you, kid, were quite clever. You saw at a glance that I was different from the other puppets, and you made the first move against me. I almost lost my life at your hands." As the old man spoke to this point, he seemed to become angry again. "I made the first move. If it weren't for you using that damn 7 emotions technique to ambush me, even though I thought the puppet you transformed into was a bit strange, I wouldn't have done anything. As a result, being caught off guard, my second primordial spirit and you ended up in this delicate stalemate. While it's true you can use the 7 emotions technique to make my second primordial spirit go berserk and become completely uncontrollable, I can also control the second primordial spirit through my main primordial spirit and use the art of assimilation to make your terrified soul and second nascent soul get annihilated at the same time. Hanli retorted bluntly. How was I supposed to know? You little monster. You actually cultivated a second nascent soul at such a young age. You should know. Back then, aside from my divine sense being usable, I didn't have a single shred of magical power. I only acted in self-defense. Divine Lord Dayan felt no wrongdoing at all, and instead stated righteously. This time, Hanli was speechless and didn't want to continue the conversation. Alright, let's drop this matter for now. What I didn't expect was that you actually possessed a treasure like the soul nurturing would. Otherwise, even if I had subdued you, I would have, at most, within a year or so, disappeared from this world? I guess this is a blessing in disguise. Divine Lord Da Yan paused for a moment, and said with some self-mockery, the reason I let you use the soul nurturing wood is because you promised to pass on the last 3 layers of the Da Yan Ju to me. Furthermore, I am also greatly interested in your methods of puppet creation. After all, for the past 10,000 years, aside from hibernating for long periods in the secret chamber, you've just been researching puppetry. Since I'm already cultivating your Da Yan Ju, I won't pass up on the puppetry technique either. This is just a transaction between you and me. Hanli simply stopped in his tracks and said calmly, ha ha, kid, I'm starting to like you more and more. Back in my day, I also couldn't stand those hypocritical fellows. I couldn't stand them in the slightest. If it weren't for your terrible aptitude, you would be completely unable to cultivate this old man's techniques. I really would have wanted to take you as my disciple and pass on everything I've learned in my life to you. The great development divine monarch, in Hanli's mind, said with a wild laugh. I'm already struggling just to cultivate the few techniques I have now. I simply don't have the capacity for more. Even if the techniques you gave me were 100 times better than what I'm currently learning, I wouldn't start over from scratch to cultivate them. However, as for those secret arts of yours, I am somewhat interested in those. Hanli paused for a moment. He blinked his eyes and said. A faint smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. Secret arts. I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. This old man's secret arts, double quotes dot, are all related to my primary cultivation technique. If you don't cultivate my technique, you won't be able to practice a single one of my secret arts. The old man said nonchalantly, then just forget about it. I'm content with getting the great development art and those puppetry techniques. I'm very satisfied then. It means my trip wasn't in vain, to the land of the far west. However, there's something I don't quite understand. Why didn't you pass down the true final 3 layers of the great eye art to your disciples? Instead, you created a specious, fake manual, and passed that down. Although Hanli was a bit disappointed, the tone of the conversation suddenly shifted, and he asked with some confusion. Hundreds of years have passed since the time of those disciples, yet not a single one of them managed to advance. No one reached the Nascent Soul stage. No one could inherit my mantle. Leaving the final 3 layers of the great eye art to them would have only brought disaster upon them. Besides, aren't you, who is not a disciple of my 1,000 bamboo sect, also in possession of the earlier parts of the great eye art? It seems I truly had some foresight, the great eye divine monarch said with a chuckle. The great eye art. I didn't go to the land of the far west and snatch it. It was delivered right to my doorstep. Hanli's eyes flickered, and he said faintly, rest assured, the 1,000 bamboo sect of today is no longer controlled by my lineage of disciples. Even if you really did snatch it, this old man wouldn't care. The great eye divine monarch said nonchalantly, as long as it doesn't affect the deal between us, what you think is irrelevant. However, I'll ask you one more time, Senior, are you truly unable to break that soul-sealing curse? Hanli asked with a hint of gravity. It's not that I cannot break it. It's just that my lifespan is limited. I don't have the time to do it. Otherwise, a vile curse like this, even in the spirit realm, how could it possibly trouble this old man? The great divination sovereign said with contempt. Although Hanli had anticipated this answer, he still felt a sense of extreme disappointment in his heart. Alright, since you can't break the curse either, it seems a trip to the fallen Devil Valley is my only option. After his expression returned to normal, Hanli said calmly, but the great divination sovereign, unexpectedly, did not reply. He fell silent. After a while, his voice was heard again, calling out, "Kid, going to the fallen Devil Valley is not a wise move. Back in the day, because my own great calamity was approaching, I too once had designs on the fallen Devil Valley, but later, because I created the divine sacrifice technique, I didn't pursue it. But as for my knowledge of that valley, this old man knows quite a lot. Do you really think that just because one or two people occasionally manage to come out of there alive, means this ancient place can be entered and exited safely? The ancient restrictions within, not to mention the terror of those spatial rifts, those who have never seen them simply cannot imagine it, and sometimes, these rifts will also," as Lord Dianchen spoke to this point, his voice paused for a moment, his words suddenly came to a halt, "will also what?" Han Li's heart stirred, and he pressed on with the question. "Occasionally, those spatial rifts, by pure coincidence, will directly open passages to other realms, releasing some demons and monsters. When you encounter them, you had better pray for your own safety. Open passages to other realms. What does that mean? Besides the spirit realm, the netherworld, and the immortal realm, are there really other realms?" Han Li was astonished. This old man once obtained an ancient and wondrous book. Inside, it happened to mention a few things about the realms. There is no need to mention the immortal realm. It has absolutely no connection with our human realm. As for the spirit realm and the netherworld, one is a higher realm. Similarly, it is not easy for them to have any connection with our world. One is filled with the likes of demonic souls and fierce ghosts. There won't be any great demon ghosts willingly crossing over to our human realm. Only the ancient demon realm, which is most similar to our human realm. The ancient demons within it are the ones who most enjoy coming to our human realm. If they ever have the chance to come over, they would absolutely never pass it up. And some of the powerful ones, the renowned ancient demons of antiquity, even if only some of their avatars come over, they are still incredibly formidable. I reckon that in your current state, you are definitely no match for them." The old man's voice suddenly turned cold. "Ancient demons? What are those? I've never heard of them before." With a surprised look on his face, he couldn't help but press for an answer. "What are ancient demons? That's hard to say, but they are definitely not of our human race, nor are they demon beasts. Their forms are even more varied and diverse. Each one is different. It is said that in ancient times, the ancient demon realm once opened a passage leading to our realm, and a group of ancient demons came over to wreak havoc on the human world. As a result, the ancient cultivators of that time fought them desperately for countless years, relying on their superior numbers. They eventually annihilated the invading ancient demons one by one. However, in that battle, the ancient cultivators suffered countless casualties. Their vitality was severely damaged. Many ancient cultivation techniques and spirit beasts went extinct as a result. The decline of the ancient cultivators is also closely related to this. In the solemn words of the great Divine Monarch, some ancient secrets unknown to Han Li were revealed. The ancient cultivators had fought against these ancient devils. Han Li's expression changed drastically. How powerful were the ancient devils? He himself did not know. But as for the divine abilities of the ancient cultivators, evidenced by the many ancient treasures and ruins they left behind, he was very well aware of them. Listening to the old monster's tone, the divine abilities of the ancient devils seemed to surpass those of the ancient cultivators. This made Han Li horrified. Not only that, and as for the current demonic path, some of the ancient demonic techniques practiced by its cultivators were only created after the existence of the ancient devil realm became known, established by later generations. Through the techniques they created, they imitated some of the divine abilities of the ancient devils. Some creators could even use secret arts to reach across realms, and borrow the demonic cha of specific, named ancient devils to possess their bodies, thereby greatly increasing their own divine abilities. However, while these demonic techniques are incomparably powerful, it is rumored that if one cultivates such a technique to its absolute peak, one does not ascend to the legendary spirit realm, but instead gathers in the ancient devil realm, becoming one of the ancient devils. Of course, this is only a rumor. It has never been confirmed by anyone, but many demonic cultivators of the demonic path still covet the power of this ancient demonic art. There are those who risk cultivating this kind of demonic art. After all, ascending to the ancient demon realm is a matter for the spirit transformation stage. Such a distant affair is something they don't need to consider at all. Of course, the chance of the spatial rift into Vilful Valley opening an inter-realm passage is not very high. Perhaps you will be perfectly safe during the few days you are in the valley. It may just be me worrying for nothing. As the old man spoke to this point, his voice slowed down, but upon recalling the manifestations of several demonic arts he had seen before, the demonic transformations that resulted, and some of the strange illusions that appeared, He took a sharp breath. In his heart, he was 70 to 80% convinced. If ancient demons really did pass through the Devilful Valleys, spatial rift from another realm, our Tianan cultivation world would have fallen into chaos long ago. But so many years have passed. We have never heard of any ancient demons or similar creatures appearing. After Han Mei's expression remained grim for a long while, he asked with lingering confusion, "What is it that you know? This spatial rift is not a true inter-realm passage. After all, the demons and monsters that can cross over can only be some avatars or low-level beings, but because their cultivation is insufficient, they are unable to resist the repulsive force of our realm's natural laws. They won't be able to stay in our human realm for very long. When the time comes, their bodies will either self-destruct, or they will flee back through the rift the way they came. How could they have time to go and attack your Tianan region?" The great Divine Lord sneered a few times, speaking as if with a curl of his lip. "So only low-level demons can cross over, and there's a time limit as well." Han Li's tense expression relaxed. He breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he recalled the Mulan spellmasters, and the demon zither that was summoned with the ancient lamp. It seemed to be a similar situation. "Kid Han, don't celebrate too soon, although this is just speculation. But, if monsters like the Gumo really do appear, even the weakest of them won't be that weak. As for the techniques of the Gumo, they are incomparably bizarre. Even a human cultivator of an equivalent level would face certain death against a Gumo of the same rank." The great Divine Lord reminded him rationally. Han Li's brow furrowed. He was already deep in thought. "Senior, since you've never entered the ancient devil realm yourself, how do you know about this matter so clearly? You're not just trying to scare me, are you?" Han Li let out a long breath. His tone shifting, he calmly asked, "I have never entered the valley myself, but back then, several of my rather skilled cultivator friends joined forces to enter the fallen Devil Valley. As it turned out, their luck was terrible. Just as they entered the valley, they ran right into an ancient devil that had crossed over from another realm. After a great battle, only one of them managed to escape with his divided soul, and he fled to me. These men were all like me. They lived their lives in obscurity. The matter of them entering the valley is known by very few in the heavenly south cultivation world. All right, I have said enough for today. If you are going to the fallen Devil Valley to hunt for treasure, you had best be on your guard. Here is the mantra for the 5th level of the Great Development Art, and the refinement methods for 2 types of core formation level puppets. This is part of the payment I promised you back then. You should take it now." As he finished speaking, from the bamboo tube on his back, a pure white jade slip shot out. After circling once overhead, it fell straight down. "I thought you had forgotten about this matter, Senior." Although Han Li was still processing the shock from the news of the ancient devil, seeing this, a flash of joy still appeared on his face. He raised his hand and grabbed the jade slip, and immersed his consciousness into it. He quickly scanned through it. "Now, I must rest and recover my energy, so I can continue researching puppetry techniques in the cave abode heaven. Don't disturb me unless it's important," the great Divine Lord said rather lazily, uttering his last few words. His voice then came to an abrupt stop, and no further words were heard. After Han Li finished with the jade slip, he turned his head to look at the bamboo tube on his back. His expression became uncertain. He knew this old monster was still hiding something, but there was nothing he could do about it, and the so-called cave abode heaven was actually the bamboo tube on his back. Although this bamboo tube looked plain and ordinary, not the least bit eye-catching, it was a genuine spatial treasure. It contained a world of its own inside. The great Divine Lord's true puppet body was hidden within it. Otherwise, Han Li would have long since put it in his storage pouch, instead of carrying it on his back. After a moment, Han Li put away the jade slip and looked around. He then raised his head and looked at the sky. Suddenly, he transformed into a streak of cyan and red light, shooting straight out of the city. By this time, it was already late. The sky was completely dark. She came to a stop in the sky above a forest outside the city. The streak of light landed under a large tree not far within the forest. Vaguely, there seemed to be something there. Han Li walked over, her expression unchanged. It was a huge, disheveled human head. If an ordinary person were to see it, they would naturally be terrified. But upon closer inspection, one could see that it was actually a person buried in the ground, with only their head exposed above the soil. And this person had strangely long and bizarre green hair, which messily covered their face. As Han Li approached, the disheveled person immediately sensed something. The head moved slightly. A pair of sinister, jade-green eyes immediately shot out. But after getting a clear look at Han Li, its gaze immediately became submissive. Han Li smiled faintly. She took a few steps forward. and circled the head a few times with great interest. Not bad. It has already developed a simple spiritual sense. It seems it will be useful in the Devilful Valley, Wanling muttered to herself, looking somewhat pleased. Afterwards, Wanling immediately set up a restrictive spell nearby, and sat down cross-legged again. She did not immediately close her eyes to enter a meditative state, but instead, he reached into his storage bag. He took out a yellow token and played with it for a moment. He looked at the front, which was imprinted. The token bore the words Tiaji Sect. Hanli's golden eyes half squinted. A pair of bright golden eyes glittered in the darkness. After spending a night in the forest, the next day, Wanling put away the Heavenly Fiend Demon Master and headed straight for Wanling Mountain. Yesterday, before finding Zilin and the others, he hadn't found in the city any traces of the Tiaji Sect disciples, although he was holding that token given to him by the Tiacha Sect elder. He was unable to use it for the time being, let alone find Marquis Nan Long. It seemed either the Tiacha Sect cultivators had another residence, or that the people from this sect had simply not arrived yet. Wanling was not in a hurry about this. He prepared to go near Wanling Mountain, to find a place to settle down temporarily, and refine some core formation stage puppets on the side. With that item in his hand, even if he didn't go looking, he estimated that Marquis Nan Long would come to him on his own accord. By now, Wanling also vaguely understood. The northern extremity essence light the other party mentioned was definitely not at the entrance to the outer valley. It would most likely appear in the passage leading to the inner valley. Otherwise, no matter how capable the Ghost Spirit sect was, they couldn't have let several hundred cultivators simultaneously evade the northern extremity nascent light and enter the valley. As he pondered this on one hand, he transformed into a streak of cyan and red light, and advanced unhurriedly, with Hanli's flight speed. In just a moment, he left the distant Yuhua city far behind, completely out of sight. He had flown dozens of miles away. At his current speed, flying to the vicinity of Wanling Mountain would only take about half a day's time. He heard that several market cities near Wanling Mountain had already caught wind of things and opened for business. Wanling could go to these markets first to purchase some materials for refining. Materials for making puppets. Wanling had once, in a one-on-one battle during the border war, and by using that inherited ancient lamp of the Mulan people, obtained the equivalent of almost an entire mid-sized sect's entire hoard of rare materials. These materials, worth nearly 10 million spirit stones, were enough for Wanling to refine a daunting number of high-level puppets. So, what he was going to the market cities to acquire were actually some of the common, ordinary materials used in puppet making. As for the ancient Nascent Soul level puppet he was intent on refining, although at the 1,000 bamboo cellar in the land of Extremian, he had found another 2 or 3 of the missing materials, but he hadn't gathered all of them yet. There was another one called Whirlwind. He had not yet managed to collect this wood material. This type of material was a rare top-tier material for artifact refining. Although it wasn't as difficult to obtain as Gangjin, it was still an item with a price but no market. When he could collect it was purely a matter of luck. Fortunately, Wanling had already instructed the disciples of the Luo Yun sect to help him keep an eye out for it. If there was any news of this material, they were to acquire it immediately or simply notify him. Gathering this item was only a matter of time. However, before entering the Fall and Devil Valley, there was simply not enough time. Suddenly, Hanli's expression changed. His traveling light paused for a moment, and then slowed down considerably, because not far ahead, spiritual energy was surging violently. Flashes of light were flickering. They were actually cultivators engaged in intense combat. Wanling furrowed his brow slightly, but he didn't mind, as this place was currently filled with all sorts of people. There was no one maintaining overall order. When enemies ran into each other, it was quite a normal occurrence for a fight to break out. With his cultivation level, Wanling approached them in the blink of an eye, to within a few hundred yards. These cultivators were still completely unaware, preoccupied with their desperate fight. For men and one woman were divided into 2 opposing sides. Hanli's gaze swept over them. He could see they were all at the core formation stage, and most of them appeared to be in the early to mid-core formation stage. However, it seemed the 2 sides held a deep grudge. Not only were magic treasures flying all over the sky, but all sorts of talismans in their hands were also continuously shooting and exploding. But the side with 2 men and 1 woman was instead being suppressed by the 2 cultivators on the other side. They were being completely overwhelmed. However, this wasn't because the opposing cultivators had more profound magic power than them. It was because the 2 cultivators, one tall and one short, were actually commanding several hundred jet moths to tightly surround the 2 men and 1 woman. These terrifying, palm-sized giant moths as they flapped their wings, would inevitably spray out a colorful, poisonous powder, which filled the air. The three on the other side had to use most of their energy casting spells to create an impenetrable defense for themselves. Combined with the attacks from the two male cultivators' magic treasures, the three of them struggled to cope, and were naturally outmatched. However, judging from the scene, although the three of them were at a disadvantage, to truly decide a winner would take more than just a short while. Furthermore, with these people's cultivation levels, except for those poisonous moths and a scholar in a brocade robe, the unleashed silvered brush and golden scroll magical artifacts, he was quite surprised. The magical combat of the other cultivators, however, was naturally not worthy of his attention. Although he didn't know which sect these cultivators belonged to, Hanli had no interest in meddling in others' affairs. Just as he was about to ignore them and fly past, his gaze shifted. He suddenly noticed on the scholar's sleeve cuff an embroidered yellow maple leaf insignia. Yellow Maple Valley. Hanli was taken aback, a bit unexpected. Then his gaze swept over the scholar's face a couple of times. His expression flickered.